Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our podcast. It is Sunday. I'm popping my beer, and I don't know what Callan's drinking, but it's a beautiful Sunday afternoon, and we're reporting to you from Boston and LA.
Yeah, I've got a hibiscus LaCroix with a gold straw because I'm all about living my best life at all times, and some coffee because it is only 1 p.m. for me, which is the morning.
Oh, I love this. I got up at noon today. Did I tell you? I got up at noon and I freaked out. It's like, oh my God, half the day is gone.
I know. I got up at 10, but only because my cat would not let me sleep anymore. I could have happily kept sleeping till noon. I'm jealous.
So this podcast is, all about radical feminism, but we wanted to make sure that, these concepts and radical feminism framework is not distant, and we want to make sure that these principles and framework are applicable to every woman's life, and we wanted to make sure that women who are in sticky heterosexual relationship situations get the guidance of radical feminism, and choose wisely and decide for choose happiness and have a better outcome. That said, we're gonna take questions, and we're gonna think about how what our opinions are on that particular question, and also how radical feminism framework can be at play. Did I explain that well?
Yeah, I think that's really good. I also just want to add that, radical feminism, as you have famously talked about already, Evelyn, helps everyone. So to the extent that a man has a question, or a non-binary person, or someone is in a non-heterosexual relationship that has questions, I still think that this framework can totally be applied, because a lot of the bad habits that I think queer people learn come from the bad habits that have been taught to us.
Absolutely.
By, the heteronormative framework. So definitely all comers are welcome. I think that's maybe the initial idea for the podcast, but as we keep going, I'm excited to see where it goes and where it takes us and what kind of questions we end up getting. I don't want to limit it to anyone. I want everyone to participate.
Absolutely. I think one thing, since it's the Pride Month, as I've recently spoken about how heterosexuality and what we have, what heterosexual people have, is not good. And heterosexuality and patriarchy, I think, is an institution, and it's a product, and it's no longer just a biological attraction to the opposite sex.
Totally.
And that said, I'm deeply concerned about straight women. Including myself. I
hear you. Yes.
So, I think, hopefully, airing out some of our grievances, and, us providing our radical feminism framework to a lot of these, to some of these questions and grievances, will help women, make better choices, and, see the light, and, have more context as to why certain things are happening in their lives, and, really know that, most of the times they're not really at fault.
Totally. Or the ways you are at fault, just because, all of these lessons take a lifetime to unlearn. We're all sexist and racist and ableist and homophobic and transphobic because we spent our whole lives marinating in a culture that espouses those values. So a lot of times we can also stand in our way of happiness, and maybe sometimes it's nobody's fault. It's just the system that both of you are operating in that's working for neither of you. So how do we start as women and all people making choices that pull us further and further away from these systems that are not serving us.
Absolutely. So our first talk involves, when to have sex, when you're, in a heterosexual dating context, a woman is seeing a man, and how fast is it, how long should she wait to have sex with him, and so on and so forth. So that will be our conversation for today.
Yeah.
Um,
the age-old question, right?
What do you think?
I think it's hard. Obviously everything's going to be an individual context. Some people feel way less attached to sex as an emotional activity. Some people see a lot more meaning in it than others, and I don't think either is right or wrong. What I think ends up being difficult is if you don't know yourself super well and you make a choice that doesn't really serve you, and then later you feel a lot of regret or feel a lot of shame about it. Not that you should, but that doesn't mean you don't. Like how do we navigate that sort of sticky situation of what you actually want and what society is telling you? I think that's a really difficult line to traverse.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say that I think it's really ridiculous that there needs to be any rules, by the way, in the way
Sure.
that men and women connect with each other in romantic context. I think that's super messed up. It's just stupid, right? Like, why should there be any rules, right? For anyone to, text anybody, say how they really feel, engage in physical activities, right? Like, why should there be any rules? That said, I think that speaks volumes to just how much heterosexuality and heteronormativity, right? Like heterosexuality as an institution, as a patriarchal institution, has messed us all up. Yes, we now live in a world where we really can't. We have to have rules to connect with each other. Because being ourselves, oh my God, like there can't be an answer to anything.
I'm even thinking to like classic 90s sitcoms, like Sex and the City style conversations about things like this. And I don't know if they had this exact conversation in Sex and the City, but I feel like it's a little bit of a trope of the sort of female-centric sitcom. Like you have to have X number of dates before you sleep with him, or you're easy. And if you wait too long, then you're a prude and he's going to lose interest. So it ends up it's like gamifying sex. And that's something that I personally haven't experienced a ton of, maybe because I'm a little bit shameless, but I have overheard conversations of other people being like, oh, we had sex really early, now I'm kind of judging her for it. And it's like, first of all, you were there too. And second of all, where does that come from? It seems very silly to me to have these rules, like you said. But I think the reality on the ground is we can sit here talking to each other and say that's silly, but that doesn't help actual people who are out there dating and trying to figure this out.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's why, unfortunately, the world we have is the world we have. And I think the society we have is that, men do not humanize women. Men, when men are channeled to think that, see him, feel him, fuck him, leave him, right? That's their messaging. That's the messaging that they get since a very young age. So when we have men who think like that and who have been programmed to think like that, women, if they want to build, sustainable relationships with them, you sort of have to navigate around those rules, which is really unfair, and that's really fucked up. But that's why you see a lot of these like dating coaches and love coaches offering these advice that women do not sleep with men for at least 3 months, or for 2 months, for however many months, however many dates. So practically speaking, they make sense to me. I understand why they offer those guidances.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I don't judge them. Like, so I don't judge women who sleep with men on the first date. I don't judge women who wait until they're married to sleep with him. I don't, judge. I don't judge regardless. But I think, whenever somebody asks like, oh, like how long do we have to wait until we sleep with somebody? If a woman is asking that, I think like I first want to know like the motivation, right? Like what's motivating her to ask that question, right? Is it shame based? Is it fear based? Right? Because she could, is she trying to build a sustainable relationship with him, and that's that's why she's trying to navigate this, or like is she afraid of being slut shamed? So what is motivating? And I feel like that could be, I think knowing that motivation would help better guide our opinions on it. You know what I mean?
Definitely. I think from a personal perspective, I've always thought of this question more from a fear-based perspective than a shame-based perspective. Maybe it's just because the circles I run in, personally, I think there's perhaps less, like I'm not getting shamed from my friends for doing anything like that. That's sort of the culture that we grew up in, being like a little more liberal, progressive, college educated. I think that a lot of people who've studied gender studies in college, I think those are a lot of the people I've ended up becoming friends with for obvious reasons. So, that's not something I'm like ashamed to tell my friend that I slept with someone on the first date. I have just gotten that like weird feeling in my stomach sometimes though, when I feel like they're pushing a little too hard, or I don't know someone, or I have these realizations like, yeah, I'm having a great time with this person who I've known for 4 hours. Do I want them in my house? And I think that can be like, at what point do you feel, especially someone who's experienced sexual trauma,
Right.
I can have really bad reactions to having like sexual experiences with someone for the first time. And that can be hard too, is at what point do I feel safe doing that? And when, like, I want to seem down and cool, and I still very much feel that hookup culture pressure, but how do I balance that with also protecting myself? That's something I struggle with.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, speaking of hookup culture, I mean, that also messed up us a lot. Like that's like, I think that's one of the evilest institutions of the day. I feel like hookup
I
culture.
totally agree.
Like, because that entire thing is based on who cares less, right? Like, and I just that's patriarchy.
Yeah. I've always, and this is actually, I don't want to put my foot in my mouth too much, but sort of a lot of the pop interpretations of sort of like fourth wave feminism or sex positive feminism have always kind of turned me off for that reason, because something about them feels like liberal feminism in disguise. Like who can act the most like men? And
yes,
if you want to have sex with 500 million people with no emotional connection, and that's what you want, that is totally great. Like, live your best life. That's not the problem. That's not like, I'm not putting shame on individual people for having like casual hookups. I myself have done this many times, but it makes me that ended up, at least when I was in college, and I graduated in 2014 from undergrad. So that's giving you a sense of like when I was in my 18 to 22 range. That was like social capital, was fucking and not caring. And
yes,
I find that like that can't be the answer either. Like, being free to have sex as women should not be emulating the worst of male behaviors. And I think that's really hard to disentangle yourself from.
oh, like I just like jumped up and down in my seat, like, oh yes, like yes, right, like
Yeah.
no, the whole point of radical feminism is I want to, like, we have to connect with people. We have to stop dehumanizing each other. We have to humanize each other. We have to empathize with each other. We have to see them as human beings with personhood. And I feel like so many of these, women have been taught that if we want to make it in this world, we have to act more like men. Or we have to act more like women who men expect us to be. And so
Yeah.
you have two
Like
choices.
the classic cool girl. Like, I like sports, but I'm mysteriously hot. Like
Exactly. And that's why it's women's liberation, because we only have two choices. And I don't want to, women should not be limiting their, limiting their life into either of these options. It's not fair. That's
right.
restricting.
Yeah. I mean, let's just break it. I mean, like, what are the basics of radical feminism? Maybe that's where we should sort of start with this first episode.
Yo,
Is
hello, Callahan?
radical feminism.
Hello?
Oh, hello?
You're breaking up a lot.
I can hear you.
Okay, you broke up a lot. Is your Wi-Fi okay?
Oh, doing my best here. Okay.
So what were you saying? What about the radical feminism? I say it again.
Oh, what were we saying? I was saying, like, if we break it down to the basics of what radical feminism really is, it is questioning the structures of society that are patriarchal, heteronormative, and obviously in the intersectional context, racist, ableist, transphobic, homophobic, all of these things. We should be incredibly skeptical of any system that's currently in place, and basically any system of relationships we have with other people that's sort of widely accepted. I think that they all deserve to be questioned and are not necessarily the natural order of things. I mean, I personally am really skeptical of even like the entire concept of monogamy in marriage. I think we need to really take a long, hard look on why we are behaving in certain ways, and like why certain people think certain behaviors are cool or acceptable or admirable. I think we have to think really hard about what we sort of take for granted in these spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I agree with all that. That is radical feminism. And for me, I like to look at it as, I don't want to go closer to the norm, right? I want to change what the norm is.
Definitely.
Right. So the heteronormativity, like heterosexuality was the norm. No, I want the norm to be queerness. Right. And then there are people saying like, oh no, but why does there have to be any norm at all? It's like, well, because that's the society.
Yeah.
Like, that's society. And so, there are always going to people at the center. There are always going to people in margins. It's just that is a natural order of things. But
totally.
How we treat people in the margins, like in margins, and how, once you are closer to the norm, what you do with that social power and how you treat people who are farther along, further from the norm, that's what makes humanity. That's what, that's what matters. So, and we've tried, heterosexuality as the norm. We've tried patriarchy as a norm. We tried all that. It hasn't worked. Like, none of it works. Like, what we have is not good. So I don't want I don't want people to do well in this context. I want the context to change, right? So everyone does well.
100%.
Yeah. So that is, you said it so well. That is radical feminism. And I think that's why it's so hard. Because, we're constantly telling people like, nah, like how you think is part of the problem. And you don't want to hear that. Right. Like, you don't want to hear, how, we've all been programmed to think a certain way. And, for us to do well in society, we have to do certain things. And if we did X, Y, and Z and believed in, A, B, and C, we were good people and we were doing well. And now all of a sudden we're being told, nah, actually that's racist. Right. So I think that's why a lot of people are resisting, but I mean, you can't resist it and like have change.
Totally. I mean, I always think like if we lived in like our perfect, totally feminist vacuum, like what would our relationships look like? What would all of these industries look like? What would these systems look like? If you don't think that we would all be wildly pansexual, like you're wrong. Like, of course we would be. Why would we like arbitrarily limit ourselves to anything? And that doesn't mean preferences can't exist or that they wouldn't exist or that there's not, some biological attraction that some of us have more for like one type of person than another. I mean, like that's fine, but I mean, I think we all need to break away from the concept that we're very free thinking. I think we're all absolutely products of our system. And a lot of our behaviors are not really our own choices. And so when you really start to look hard on the choices you have made, you know, air quotes around choices and how you've behaved in these systems and how these systems have benefited or not benefited you, it can be really difficult. I mean, I think like, I mean, I think of how sometimes there's like a new area of social justice that is new to me or that I haven't heard very much about. And I start reading, you know, some really cool activists' Instagram or like flipping through their Twitter to learn more about it. And sometimes they'll say things that I have an immediate negative reaction to because what it is it's challenging my you know, my whiteness or, you know, my perceived straightness or my perceived cisgender status. I mean, I am all of those things. I'm probably not really straight, but so far I've behaved as straight this far in my life. And I have these reactions because it's a challenge. It's another way I have to think, fuck, I thought I was doing a really good job. And there's more for me to do. And that always is going to be hard, but then it's incumbent on me to think about that and do better. But this is coming from someone who has spent years learning in these spaces and has spent a lot of time thinking really deeply. And I still find it really difficult to traverse some of these mountains or, you know, like, or get over some of these hurdles. And I try, and I think a lot of people do not try. And I think that's where we get a lot of these issues when we're asking people to do something hard. It can take a lot of work even if you want to do the right thing. And I think a lot of people are kind of happy chilling, you know?
Yeah, totally.
Am I cutting out?
Yeah, you cut out a little bit, but I understood you.
Okay, sorry people. I'll start kicking more stuff off. My internet.
The misogynistic internet.
So annoying. I know. My internet is it's not working with me. Ugh. All right. Working out the kinks, people. Sorry. It's our first go.
I think I think have you taken the Kinsey scale test?
I think so. I mean, I know what it is. I don't know if I've ever taken a test or anything.
Yeah, so
yeah.
Most people fall in the spectrum of, you know, 0.05 to 5.5, which is, you know, 0 being exclusively homosexual to 6 being exclusively heterosexual. You fall somewhere in the middle. So yes, it's just that that's what I'm saying. The queerness should be norm. Like you have the mass number of people who fall into this categorization, which is pan. And then you're telling people, no, that's not the way to live. You have to either be exclusively homosexual, like you have to be not even homosexual. You have to be exclusively heterosexual. So you are tailoring to this very small group of people and saying that this is the aspiration. And that's like, of course you are going to make that rule. Like like white cis heterosexual men, like who made these rules. I mean, of course, like, it's like, right. So I'm done with tailoring to the small minority of people who've had certain lifestyle choices, like who've had certain power and now have insisted that they are the way to live. They are the good way to live. So I'm done with it. Like that's why I'm saying, no, queerness has to be the norm.
Yeah.
Like,
and I mean, it's and I'm not like a historian, but this is what I've gathered and from my own assumptions about how the world works, is that the focus on heteronormativity is so clearly linked to patriarchy, in the sense that women were like quite literally like chattel to be bandied about in marriage as like, you know, like you make children, you carry on the family name, that's your function, be quiet now. And it was beneficial to the male, you know, presumably like European white, you know, hegemonic system to have heterosexuality, and God knows what they were doing on the side. I'm sure all sorts of stuff, but you know, that doesn't benefit them for women to be pansexual or to date women or to like not be in these heterosexual systems, because then they're no longer acting as basically property.
Mm.
I mean, I think like all of these systems come from something, and it's never good. If you look at any industry, any system, any like cultural practice that's practiced by the norm, there's always dark evil roots, and it's very overwhelming. But I think that's why when you start peeking into this world, and like that first little thing, you know, like that first little end of the string becomes untangled from the giant knot, and you can like start to see where it comes, and you pull on it, and all of a sudden like the whole world breaks open, and you're like, wow, everything's bad, and we like need to work so hard to fix it. It's really hard to take these like hegemonic systems seriously, or to think that like heterosexuality can possibly be the norm. You know, it's just everyone's been lying to us our whole lives, and it makes me mad, because I feel like, who would I have been if they hadn't taken all of these choices away from me?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's what patriarchy does. It you know, it imposes on us a certain model of humanity that is not us, that is not authentic. And I want people to be themselves. Like, I want people to wear what they want, love who they love, care about the things that they care about, to dance when they want to, like sing when they want to. Like, that's the community I want. Totally. Like, I want people to like connect with each other, you know, stop discarding people, stop leaving people. Like, I want connections to be strong and authentic, because they are being their like truest, like authentic selves, you know? And like, yeah, like if you're not being 100% yourself, like, can you actually show up as, you know, yourself in relationship, and can that relationships be strong then?
Yeah. And how can you advocate for yourself in that relationship? I mean, that's something
Absolutely.
I still struggle with. I think we all do. I mean, we can talk about these things all we want, and it's much harder to like live the values that you intellectually know, and you're still struggling to like internalize fully in your heart, or your, you know, your spirit, or whatever, however you want to phrase it. I mean, I think it's something you have to work out your whole life. We're never going to be like perfectly like we're like, how can we be perfect radical feminists in a world that's completely bent against all of those values? You know, sometimes it's really hard to be walking uphill every single day, constantly, in every situation.
For sure. I mean, so yeah, I mean, so, you know, going back to our, you know, question about, you know, when is okay for you to have sex with a man that you're seeing? I mean, yeah, I think this is a highly individualistic question, but I mean, if I were to assume, right, that you know, the narrative would be, you know, the most common narrative would be a woman wanting to build a sustainable relationship with a man she's been seeing for a while, or she is just starting to see, really attracted to him. When is it safe, quote unquote safe, and I mean safe in very multi-dimensional way, like in all covering way. When is it safe for her to actually be intimate with that person, with a man? And right, and so in that question there's so much, because that grievance, right, that grievance in and of itself is stressful, right? Like that grievance should not be happening, like in a human world where we're trying to connect with each other. Because I think sexual activity is a very natural act of intimacy and natural act of pleasure. And the fact that there are rules attached to it, and you have to navigate these rules in order for you to have a successful, meaningful relationships, I think that's complete bullshit.
Totally.
That said, I also know, like, this is men's programming, right? Like, this woman is trying to navigate the men's programming, which is the, you know, see him, feel him, fucking love him. So I mean, and I think my initial reaction to that question would be, I mean, I first really want to ask her, like, how do you, like, what do you think? I think the foremost thing is, I think women need to be stopped given advice. Like I want women to find their own advice that they have for themselves within. I think that's what I want as a radical feminist. There are way too many self-help books, and there are way too many books, relationship books, where they tell women what to do, how they do things, what to wear, what to say. And I just want to know, like, what do you think?
Yeah.
No, I want to know what you think. Tell
Yeah.
me what you think. And we can have conversations. Like, we can have long conversations about what you think and where that comes from. I think that's more meaningful and that's more authentic than
Yeah.
being fed like bunch of guidance, like being like, oh, don't do this, don't do that, like do this, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
So that's my initial reaction. And I think the second thing is, I think you really got to listen to your gut. That you know there's so many dating coaches and there's so many love coaches who say, if you wait for 3 months and if you wait for 2 months until you have sex with them or be intimate with them, you'll have a better result. And because of these like X, Y, and Z hormones, like all that stuff. And I'm aware that they're out there, and I don't mean to disrespect them. I think they're doing good work. But for me, I think the nature of each relationship is so unique, and we have to make rooms to honor the authenticity and uniqueness of each and every relationship. And so when we talk about these general rules about don't sleep with somebody until X, Y, and Z, I think we're doing the service to these relationships that happen in very different, in very different settings, and that have idiosyncratic qualities to them. And I just want both people, all I want is that both people in the relationship be faithful to who they are and how they feel about each other at all times. And have no shame about it, no regret about it, and really connect with each other. That's what I want. Right?
Yeah. And any guy worth your fucking time. I've decided we're having a swearing podcast, by the way, because there's no way I'm going to be able to hold my tongue. Any guy worth your time.
We love it. We love swearing.
This is not going to be a child-friendly podcast. If you are the kind of person who does not allow your child to hear swear words, I do not want kids. If I were to have them, I can't say I would make that same choice. But any guy worth your time isn't going to judge you for making a consensual decision to do XYZ with him at any point in the relationship. I think a lot of the struggle comes from a lot of guys aren't worth your time and are going to, but then once you've already had sex with him, if you do have complex feelings about that, or you have trauma that makes you feel especially vulnerable, or you just, like you have an opinion about sex and relationships and emotions, which is perfectly valid. And maybe you ascribe a lot more emotionality to sex than someone else, which is fine. And again, valid. If he then acts like an asshole after the fact, even though you were both making a consensual decision as adults, that can be really hard to deal with after the fact. And so sometimes the decision you're making before it ever happens is, am I ready to take on this risk that he's going to treat me differently because of the decision we're both clearly making? And then he's going to step back and be like, whoa, like you're a certain kind of gal, which obviously fuck that guy, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to feel bad about it, especially if you had feelings for him.
Right. Yeah, I think that's why I think that's what I see from these dating coaches. Like they want to protect, they want to make sure that the women are protecting themselves, from getting hurt, from getting heartbroken, by wrong men, by unworthy men. I think that's what I see, and I think that's the part where it gets and so that's why I say I don't mean to disrespect them. I think they're doing good work because.
I think that's a fair and risk-averse strategy, but it might not always work on the ground.
Exactly. I mean, I think so. That's what I see, right? I think both efforts need to happen at the same time. I think women need to be guarded and navigate these strategies because we need to be realistic, and we just need to know, like we just have to be strategic. But also at the same time, I think we also need to push forward this voice that. Listen, like, and this is addressing men mainly, right? Mm-hmm. If you like, your job as a man is not to have body counts. Your job is to connect with women, Like your duty is to connect with women in a way that is meaningful and authentic and strong. Like you can't, like, this is not,
Yeah.
change the way you treat women. That's,
Yeah.
so I think both need to happen at the same time. Right.
Totally. And I can already see people like twisting what you're saying. So I'm just going to come out ahead of it and say, Evelyn does not mean that you have to be in a long-term marriage to have sex, or that, like, you know, you can still be incredibly respectful to another person during a one-night stand. You can be
Absolutely.
communicative, you can be thoughtful, you can be respectful, you can be upfront about your wants and desires, what you're looking for. That's what she's saying. You know? I can already hear people being like, well, Evelyn.
Thank you for having my back. It has been rough. It has been rough. Yeah, I mean, totally, right? I mean, it's that's what I'm saying. Like, if the default is humanization of everybody, you're going to treat that other person with respect and kindness and empathy, you know, even when you are engaging in a very short-term, casual, or it's just one night thing, because
Yeah.
you are engaging with a human being.
Right.
Right? Like, I'm taking
Yeah.
an issue with the fundamental
Yeah.
attitude, you know, by which we look at each other, and by, you know, how we treat each other. Like, no, like you do not get to use that person as an object.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, that's
Yeah.
that's the issue I take.
Totally.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. And like and this feminism is good for men. You know what's way better? Sex, when you have open lines of communication and a fundamental respect for the other person. Otherwise, get a fucking fleshlight. Like, it helps everyone to be able to live your truth and live your values and treat each other with kindness and thoughtfulness and be communicative. And always easier said than done. I think there's a lot of concerns. I hear this sometimes. People are like, I assume my internet connection's unstable. I'm going to talk slow in case I cut out more, but there's this is it cutting out?
Yeah, it's cutting out.
Are we good?
I'm a posit. Okay, so we're back because we had a little bit of internet difficulty, and we totally forgot where we were. That's awkward. But yes,
I had an internship my first summer of law school, so my like first year summer, and it wasn't that great of an internship, and I don't remember a lot about it, but I do remember I was in the car with one of the lawyers. We were just chatting. So we were like driving 2 hours to one of the immigration detention facilities kind of north of Los Angeles. It was a immigration law internship, and I remember I was just talking, and then I hit this point where I was like, I have no idea what I was talking about. And then she was like, that's okay. Like, I'm usually not that interested in what I'm talking about either. And I've always liked that. It was so funny because it was like, when you're just rambling and you're like, I'm not even interested in what I'm saying, which isn't quite the case here, but it always made me laugh. I always think of that when I lose my train of thought. Like, I'm not that interested in what I'm saying either. Like, sorry.
I love that. So to backtrack a little, I think we were talking about, so the last thing I remember is, you know, us talking about how, you know, women need to be cautious, and, you know, strategize. I think we were also talking about the fact that I take discomfort, and like I take issue with the fact that, you know, people treat each other like objects, you know, and that, you know, they're just, like you can have casual flings, you can have one night stands, there's no problem with it. It's just, it's the way we treat each other, and it's just the way we view each other. And if you're programmed to objectify one another and dehumanize one another, that's hurtful, and I think that's problematic. And I think those interpersonal dehumanization adds up to the systemic and structural dehumanization, which upholds the systems that we have, which is patriarchy, white supremacy, and all these other, all of these problematic systems.
Totally.
So we do have to take agency, and we do have to take it seriously that we do have to take initiative, and we do have to take our agency and really commit to, treating everybody with respect and, honesty and dignity and human dignity and and empathy. And I think that's the only way we move forward. And it's like, it's often people say like, oh my gosh, like these, you know, and I see a lot of, you know, pessimistic people say, you can't change everything. And I'm like, well, yes, you can.
Not with that
Like, yes,
attitude.
you can. Right. Yes, you can, because all you have to do as an average citizen, right? Well, I shouldn't say, you know, all you have to do, but the most important thing you can do if you want to dismantle patriarchy and if you want to dismantle white supremacy, you have to be kind.
Mm-hmm.
You have to commit to treating each other with human dignity. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
have to restore human dignity. And for that to happen at a systemic level, we have to commit to that interpersonally.
Totally.
So, right. So that's what, you know, this goes back to, you know, what we were talking about the left the other day. Like, the reason why I'm so frustrated by the left more than by the right is like, we are constantly telling the right to treat us as human beings and with human dignity. And yet we on this side of humanity, don't even do that for one another.
Yeah.
Right. So I want people to I want people to prioritize. I want people to really commit to making their relationships stronger and more authentic and more genuine, and that they put effort and they invest themselves and their energy in these relationships and in humanizing other people and humanizing ourselves. And I think that's the biggest assignment we have as people committed to dismantling the patriarchy.
Yeah.
So that's why I keep being like, anytime I hear people say, feminists hate men, I was like, who?
Yeah.
No, like, we've been the one. No, patriarchy hates men.
Yeah. We've been trying to teach you the joys of having like a strong and nuanced emotional life. It's great. Imagine if men talk to each other the way like female friends talk to each other.
Oh,
Like,
God.
what a world we would live in if y'all could just like get together and cry once in a while. I cry every day, and it's amazing. I highly recommend it.
Oh God, right?
Yeah.
Like, and you have to, I mean, patriarchy hates men.
Mm-hmm.
Feminism does not hate men. Like,
no.
I keep
feminism
saying, like,
is holding men to a higher standard than they've ever been held to, and that might feel really hard at first when you've never actually had to do anything that's hard before.
Right, and then
and I don't mean to be dismissive. No one's saying that men haven't had like personal struggles, but when you haven't been forced to like really grapple with your own privileges in that way, and you really have to start deconstructing like your way that you interact in the world, it's going to be toughest for the people who have the furthest to come, and that's going to be like the cis white men at the top.
Absolutely. And realizing that the higher standards are actually standards for human beings.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so, you know, realizing that, you know, men, I just really want men to realize that the first victims of patriarchy were you. Like, the first victims are you, like men. You, like, dehumanizing you and reducing you to your animalistic impulses and reducing you to these like animalistic behaviors that are violent and aggressive and that are completely devoid of the nuance and complex emotions that you were talking about, like the human emotions. Like, it completely dehumanizes the shit out of you, and then it expects you to dehumanize other people. So you're like in the perpetual cycle of dehumanization and objectification. Like, you wonder why you're not happy. Like, of course you're not happy. Of course. Like, and so whenever people say feminists hate men, I was like, excuse me, like, I love the shit out of men. Right? Like, that's why I'm a feminist. And I want things to be better for men. And the only way to get there is that men humanize themselves and they humanize women and non-men, everybody.
Yeah.
So that's our solution to the world.
Yes. Basically, it all comes down to everybody go get some feminist leaning therapy, which is harder said than done. If anyone listening knows of a good therapist in Los Angeles, a friend of mine named me is looking and is having a lot of trouble finding someone that I actually want to talk to.
I fucking love this.
But actually, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. So that reminds me of, I think this is what we were kind of going when the internet decided to intervene in our brilliance a little earlier, is that I think there's this perception that having this very human focused, very like emotionally nuanced, consent based relationships with each other, down to something like a one night stand, is it will take some of like the romance away or something to be like, may I do this? Can I do this? Can I do this? You know? And I think that, first of all, it's overblown, but I think it just goes back to the thing we were talking about, where we have to really question the systems in place, what we view as romantic, like Notebook style, like I'm gonna hang off of the Ferris wheel and basically psychologically terrorize you into going on a date with me, and then like grab you when you're not expecting and kiss you. If a guy did that to me, I'd punch him in the fucking face. Like, absolutely not, you know? And like, I think that like we're taught this is what romance should be. It should be like spur of the moment, like I saw you from across the room and we were in love forever, like forever and ever and ever, and like we just know we can read each other's bodies and everything comes so easy, and he knew exactly what I wanted. Yeah, this isn't like a book with Fabio on the cover, this is real life. And it's like, I would much rather a guy say, may I do this? Like, there's things I tend to be kind of uncomfortable with that I actually don't want like a one night stand to do. Like, I have sexual trauma around like receiving oral sex. It's something that I'm working on. I would like to do better. I would love to be completely open with that part of my body, but that's something I've been working on for years, and I've gotten better. I'm not all the way there. And I actually don't want a stranger to have his head down there right now. And I'd much rather he ask than assume. And I mean, we also have to take into account that sometimes you don't feel comfortable saying no when you really do mean no, but this is all part of the system we're trying to change, is being able to advocate for yourself. It's going to be hard, but I think that's a way. Like, I'd much rather have a world where the norm is asking permission and establishing boundaries and learning each other slowly and carefully, than a world where like a third of women have been raped. You know, like,
Yeah,
it's
and
all part of the same
also,
system.
yeah, and I also, like, whenever we have consent conversations, I think we're totally missing the point, because what we want to establish is that men and women and non-binary individuals, right? Like,
Yeah.
men start holding women in a higher esteem. If you
Mm-hmm.
hold somebody in a higher esteem, you're gonna want to know what they think and how they feel in every situation. So you're not gonna assume,
Yeah.
right? Like, that's a daring, right? Like, who would do that?
Yeah.
Right? So that's why I keep going back to, no, it's a fundamental attitudes that men have about human beings,
Yeah.
and especially about women,
Yeah.
right? It's so,
The literal objectification of women. I feel like that term has kind of lost some of its meaning because we use it a lot, which is rightfully so, the objectification of women. But think about that word as the objectification. You've taken away the humanity of this person, and you're using them for the function you see them as giving you. And that's the root of heteronormativity in a lot of ways, and the root of the issues that it causes is, how many how many like notches can I put in my bedpost, or like, or the way that sex with women is used as social currency between men. I had sex with this woman so then I could use that to talk to my male friends about and brag about. If that happens all the time in like male spaces, it's dehumanizing for men too, because I've talked to men who are like in frats who behaved in really sexually aggressive ways and had tons of like hookup culture style ways, and didn't really want to, but felt like they had to be seen as like male and fit in with their friends. And it was like trading cards. It was like how much sex they could have with women, or even like having sex with a certain kind of women, and then being able to talk about her in like really negative ways behind her back. And I mean, that's dehumanizing for you too, that those men didn't feel empowered to make their own sexual choices.
absolutely, absolutely. And also, you know, so that's why I keep saying queerness has to be the norm, because
Totally.
heterosexuality as an institution and heterosexuality as the norm, what we have is what is sexy is completely fucked up. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what we have understood to be sexy is completely messed up. We
Yeah.
have been programmed to understand that sexual aggression is sexy. Like, not asking is sexy. So all of these
Mm-hmm.
things that are really like at the core rapist values are sexy. Like, that's what we're
Mm-hmm.
taught. So that's why when I say heterosexuality is
Yeah.
dangerous, I'm not saying the fact that you are attracted to the opposite sex is dangerous. It's what it has established as a
Yeah.
norm in patriarchy, which
Yeah.
is that, the coercion and the manipulation and the violence and the abuse, like those are all what we have been taught to understand as sexy. That's why we keep having these conversations about, no, consent is sexy, right? So we're trying to reprogram people into thinking that respecting each other is sexy, right? And just like shitting on each other is not sexy. That's not good, right? So that's why that, again, this is all radical feminism, right? Like we're trying to redo everything, the system and everything that the system has produced for us, right? So
know what I hear, Evelyn? It is time to talk about porn. Just kidding. That's going to have to be its own 7-episode series, because there is no topic on this planet that I want to talk about more than porn.
Absolutely. I mean,
it's bad.
I mean, absolutely. Like we've engaged in conversations about that, right? Like multiple times, and I think we like went on and on. Like anytime we talked about that subject, so I'm happy to do it. Happy to do it. Yeah, but I mean, you know, all in all, I think my vision as a radical feminist is pretty simple. I just want people to be who they are, confident in how they feel, and just connect with each other like human beings. That's all.
Ridiculous. Like, you're radical. You're a danger to society. You need to be locked up. I am currently calling the police.
And the fact that so many people have trouble understanding this, and the fact that so many people trip over this is like, oh my God, do you all see this?
Yeah.
Right? Like, so yes. So the I think the conversation this woman is asking, which is how long do you think a woman should wait until, she has sex with that person? I think, I think it's really unfortunate, right? That number one, like, I would love to see more conversations on the men's side, right? To say, let's talk about sex. Let's talk about how this is not a commodity. This is an act. This is intimacy. And so when we engage in it, what are the stakes for women? Like the women who I am sleeping with, who I'm choosing to sleep with, what's in it for her? Like what's the risk for her? Right? Like let's really consider all of these things for her. I think I want to see that conversation, because right now it's all the women who are saying, what are the risks? What are my strategies? I'm saying, well, yes, realistically that needs to happen, but also, where are the men?
Yeah.
Right?
No, I mean, and I know that like you've gotten a lot of flack for this style of conversation with your TikToks and stuff, with the feminism is for men. Of course, feminism is also for women, but it's also for men. And we don't necessarily have to get into that. I think that's another great topic for like a more like a fulsome or podcast episode in and of itself. Although I now realize that fulsome is incorrectly used by lawyers and actually means something negative. So now I feel bad that I just used it. But I mean a complete conversation on its own. But I think about how, I mean, when it comes down to breaking down structures, we either have to kill every straight cis white guy, or we have to get them on board, and like the only way we're going to do this is to have these conversations and see how they're perceiving, because in a lot of ways it's us sort of theorizing or reflecting the views of particularly informed straight men who we know from the privileged circles in which we run academically. I am really curious to hear what the average well-meaning straight guy thinks about this, and like what his actual on the ground concerns are, real concerns, because I think I get really annoyed when I hear the like, oh, I'm just so afraid of being accused of raping someone. And it's like, easy answer, don't rape someone. Next question, and like, but I'd be curious to like have that conversation. That's something that I can only speculate about. So maybe I should think about having a guest of some sort on. That would be interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I think like, I think though too, I think I mean, that's what I worry the most about
Mm-hmm.
the culture of heterosexuality, because I think men and women have totally different understandings of intimacy and sex and
Mm-hmm.
what they think each other needs. And
Mm-hmm.
they don't really they don't really communicate, right? Like you see all
Mm-mm.
these like I went to a bookstore the other day and I like sneaked away like into the self-help book section, and you have books that are like communications for married couples, and I'm like, you have to, like that's bad, right? Like heterosexual people like
Yeah.
actually have to have mediation, facilitation for communications to happen. I'm just like, like if that were like if I had a friend, right? If
Yeah.
I had a friend and we have to actually have a book, right? Book where we can go and like
Yeah.
check in, like, oh hey,
Yeah.
let's get to know each other. Like, no,
Yeah.
that's
Evelyn,
bad.
let's do some icebreakers.
Like, no, that's bad.
Yeah,
Like
right.
that is bad.
Yeah.
So
And
like
the thing is, it's
I
like
like
women don't need that for each other, and men
yeah,
don't need that for each
exactly.
other.
So
And for all people.
that's what I'm saying. I'm
Yeah.
just like, what? No, people need to look at this. No, this you should not be taking this for granted. Like you should really look at this and ask yourself, like, are we okay? Right? Like,
Yeah.
are marriages okay? Are heterosexual people
Yeah.
okay? Because this is right.
Well, it also makes
Um,
me wonder, like, what system is so oppressive that you chose to get married to someone that you can't fucking talk to? And then obviously people change and things can happen and choices are made, or, I like, we met in a gender violence class. So that's sort of the basis of how we got to know each other. And people can change after marriage in really scary ways, because of patriarchal institutions and the concept that marriage gives you ownership over someone. Um, People can be really fucked up, So I can get all that, but a book's not going to help you out of that situation. That's for sure. I mean, we need to have like more radical conversations about what that means. But I see that all the time when people get married really young, or they think I'm a certain age, it's time to get married. First of all, why? You don't have to. Second of all, like, who are you choosing? Is it just that he's not the worst? Like, that's not a good reason to legally bind yourself to someone for the rest of your life. I just think, and it's sad that people feel like that's an achievement that they have to have at a certain time or age in order to be seen as like complete. Because I think a lot of, I mean, how is it? Like, what's the stat that's always floating around? 50% of marriages end in divorce. It goes up for every subsequent marriage.
yeah.
We're obviously not doing a good job. Heteronormativity is not working. It's not
Nope.
working.
Nope. Nope. And like I got so many like people are saying like, oh, like you can't say homosexuality is bad. Like you have to say you have to say heteronormativity, and you have to say that's not even fair either. You have to say patriarchy. I was like, no, all of those are the same fucking thing.
Yeah.
Like they're
They
the
can't survive
same.
without each other. No, they're like all departments in the same horrific corporation, and they need each other to survive. And that's why I think, like, that's why I thought what you had said the other day was super compelling about queerness, because even the people I think like kind of purposefully misunderstood you and twisted what you were saying, when you are operating in a space that's inherently not supported by a heterosexual patriarchal institution, you are a woman dating another woman, you're a man dating another man, you're non-binary dating, any other gender, whatever, like you're trans, like, whatever formulation, you're sort of non-traditional, not like cis man, cis woman, two people, like monogamous relationship pairing is, when you are being pushed out of those spaces, or you are told that you don't belong in those spaces. I'm not saying that's not incredibly painful. I'm not saying that there's not a lot of difficulty that comes along with it, but you do have the silver lining of being able to create the relationship you want to create in that space. And that means that you do not have to follow those rules. And it does not mean that people don't do that. It doesn't mean there's not incredibly toxic gay people and trans people, because some people are just assholes. I'm not saying that like there aren't carryovers that are really negative, because this is still the culture you grew up in. It's not like you're like, huh, I'm gay. Suddenly I like shirk all, like everything I've ever learned about relationships, and I'm free now. But it gives you a lot more freedom. And I think that's why you see things like a lot more non-monogamy in the gay community,
Yeah.
and things like that, because you're allowed to look at your partner and say, like, we don't have to follow the rules. What rules do we want? And I think that that's like a very valuable lesson, that if more people took that attitude into heterosexual relationships, we would have like a much better world.
So I have two thoughts. So number
Mm-hmm.
one is like people say like, oh, but no, but gay people have the higher rate of like domestic violence, blah blah blah. And it's like,
Is
yeah,
that true?
because they're yes, but
Mm-hmm.
like yeah, because they are they have internalized heterosexual norms. They're trying to make it work in a heterosexual world. Yeah, so yeah, of course, like queerness and heterosexual. Like listen, queerness and heteronormativity are at odds at odds with each other. So when you are a queer person trying to emulate heterosexual people, it's just not going to work. Like it's going to cause all this distress and like all these
Mm-hmm.
problems in the relationship, which is what we see happening. So
Yeah.
when people say like, don't put queer people on a pedestal, I'm like, I'm saying queerness is cool.
Yeah. Like
Right?
queerness
Like,
is the concept. Yeah. Not like
yes.
every individual queer person. Yeah.
And the framework and the new norm that I want to set. It's
Mm-hmm.
not, I'm not saying, queer people are perfect. I'm not saying queer people, have better relationships. I'm saying queerness is a better framework than heterosexual heteronormativity in patriarchy.
Yeah.
So like that's number one. And number two, like I have different thoughts on like monogamy. Like
Yeah.
I think monogamy is the way to go. I think, but
Really?
like I know there are like
Yeah.
counter arguments to this. So
See,
I like,
I feel like it's super not, but I'm not sure that I would be happy in a non-monogamous relationship because of my own hangups. So that's something I struggle with where I'm like, I hear that and I'm like, that makes a lot of fucking sense, but I'm not sure I would be able to do it. But I think I'd be maybe interested in exploring. For all the people listening, all 12 of you or whatever, I'm personally going through my like quarter life. Who am I and what am I doing? Probably more like a third life. I don't know if I'm going to live to be like 104, but and that's something I've been thinking a lot about is like what has made me so unhappy in my relationships and my relationship with other people generally so far, and like what might I consider trying that would make it better. So that's something that's been on my radar personally. I've not done it. I know a lot of people who have, and I'm like very interested in it. So that's maybe something we can talk about more in the future.
yeah, for sure.
I like it conceptually a lot, but
again,
it's what do two people want? Like what do you want with your partner? I think it's a big ask that one person can kind of like be your everything, but that's also my own maybe personal relationship with sex is that I get bored really fast. So maybe I would like be able to have like a long-term emotional partnership with someone, and it would actually be easier to maintain that both emotionally and sexually if they didn't have to be my only sexual outlet. Something I'm thinking about. Just batting it around. I haven't made any big decisions yet.
About it, yeah. Take your time with it. I mean, also I'm here as you go through that. But to in wrapping our very first episode of our podcast, we covered the basics of radical feminism, and we talked about a question when where a woman asked, how long should it take, should I take until a man, until I sleep with a man that I'm seeing? I hope it cleared up some things for listeners.
When you want, but be careful.
Well, no, I tend to think that women know deep down. Mm-hmm. I think women are so conditioned to find advice and guidances in everywhere else, but but ourselves, and that's why female empowerment in radical feminism is so important.
Yeah,
because women really have to be able to look inwards for power and worth and value and guidance and leadership, and I think we have it. And my question really to the women who asked this question is, what do you think? And I think there are, certain considerations you brought up, that should, I think that could be, taken into consideration. Like, do you think the guy is safe? Like, do you feel emotionally safe? Do you feel,
do you want to have sex with him?
Yeah.
Do you feel like you should? Yeah.
Exactly. And I think, reconsidering and like really evaluating the relationship in regards to your safety, right? So your emotional safety, psychological safety, right? Like physical safety, all of that stuff. I think that will illuminate some answers
Yeah.
for you in this particular situation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I would really encourage, but this is not required, but I would really encourage for any women to, in this type of position, to ask these types of questions.
Mm-hmm.
Really start to challenge men and join in the conversations that are happening, to join in the movement that is happening, that has been happening, to put pressure on men to, so they can talk about sex and intimacy in a way that is respectful to women, that is
Mm-hmm.
empathetic to women. So you personally don't have to do that because it's not on you. But if you want to be serious, and if you want
Mm-hmm.
to do further, and go outside of that interpersonal struggle that you have, there's a movement you can join
Mm-hmm.
here,
Yeah.
to put more pressure onto men, so men get it together.
100%. Could not have said it better myself.
Well, thank you everybody for listening, and we will see you
Yeah.
next week.
Au revoir.
Bye.